We can't hear you, Ethan. There's no audio.
Got that. 1 sec. Today and start the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. This week, we have a special guest. This actually is a pre-recorded session, but recently pre-recorded, very fresh off the presses, basically, just 48 hours or so before our actual air date. And I'll give an intro, as we always do, to Piano Tech Radio Hour, and then we'll give an intro to our guest today and start the conversation. But just want to welcome everybody here to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Of course, we gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano industry and world, including manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments even, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And we've got an actual masterclass coming up here on, I believe it's December 3rd, just a couple weeks up, couple Saturdays from now with Larry Lobel. He's going to do a tuning pin symposium. So talking about tuning pins for an entire lecture, just kind of, what we can expect from them, like what are the limitations, and how to potentially remedy some of the issues we find when we have like tight tuning pins and things like that. So keep an eye out for that in your email, and make sure you click the link and sign up. We do have some early bird discounts for that. All right. So without further ado, though, I'm going to come on over to our guest for today. His name is Will Armstrong. I know him as a jazz musician and piano teacher and entrepreneur in New York City. When I was living there in New York City, we met, and maybe we'll get into the story of how we met as well pretty soon. And this is actually, I believe, the third of piano teachers in New York City that I have these connections with, through being having piano tuning in New York and various ways. So it'll be interesting to hear his perspective on things. And so without further ado on, my intro, let's turn it over to Will. And Will, can you just give a little bit of background on yourself and kind of, what you're up to generally, and then we'll dive into some of my questions.
Absolutely. Well, I am Will Armstrong, and it's nice to see you again. I run a company called Will You Learn. It's been 10 years in the running in New York City. It's a music teaching business. We have lessons now online and home throughout New York City, and have expanded our online presence, and so are teaching people pretty much all over. And I'm a sort of a backwards pianist. I'm like a jazz trained classical pianist now. I actually started off studying jazz as a kid, getting into jazz, and then later getting into classical music. And then really over the last few years, with the absence of a lot of gigs for whatever reason, did a real deep dive into the classical repertoire, and have sort of spent the majority of my time now at the piano, working through the classical stuff. That's sort of my background as a pianist.
Oh, that's cool. I don't think we got into that previously, just kind of how you've dove into the classical repertoire. What's been your approach? Do you have a teacher yourself that you keep up with? Is it more just kind of getting a library of books and maybe checking out some YouTube videos? How did you approach studying classical music? Was it part of your education? Yeah. Well,
it's very interesting you should ask that. During the pandemic, when we switched our company to online, it's not something that we had done. I had done it a little bit and, sort of casually, but never really thought too much about. I knew that was a transition that was probably coming down the road, but I saw it to be much later than actually what happened out of necessity. And I said, well, if I'm going to have 100 plus kids suddenly switching to online lessons, it would be really unfair if I didn't have the same experience. So I called up my old buddy, who was my old teacher through New England Conservatory, and I was like, "Hey, Roberto, it's Will. It's been a little while. We'd actually gotten in touch for the first time in years about a recording project just a few months before. One of my clients came to me, who's a comedian. He has a lot, he does a lot of stuff, and he was doing some web episodes, and he needed a list piece. It was a reduction of a Beethoven symphony, and he's like, could you do this and make a recording of this by tomorrow? And I was like, I'd really like to I should be able to do that at this point.
Yes, yeah.
I should. I was like,
that does sound intimidating, even for a trained pianist.
I was like, no, I'm not going to be able to do this by tomorrow. But I was like, I know someone who can. I called up Roberto. I was like, could you do this by tomorrow? He's like, oh, it's not a problem. I was like, yeah, of course. He goes, but not the fugue, right? It's like, I no, we'll stop before the fugue. No problem.
Nice.
And so just a few, that happened in the summer. Actually early on as everything started going, and then as all the kids we started teaching online. I was like, yeah, let me give Roberto a shout. He's up in Boston. I said, you teaching online? I said, of course. And we reconnected that way, and have every other week our hour-long lessons, which have transformed from hour-long lessons to 2-hour-long conversations and lessons, and just kind of the good old that we used to have back when I was much younger, up in Boston, going to his house, and it's been phenomenal, like invaluable, just absolutely invaluable. The stuff, and it's things have it's a different approach than you would be in person. And actually, when we first started, when my company first switched to online, I was adamant about, like, we need to make this an opportunity to make it a better experience. This cannot be, a worse alternative, because we were screwed otherwise. And I have all these teachers who are relying on this income, especially now with no gigs. Not everything else is done. So it's like we need to make this the best possible experience and really capitalize on it. And everything that we can't do in person, let's focus on that. And so I had everyone get, and I ordered for people like overhead cameras and like all kinds of stands and this, that, and the other. And it was the week everything started to happen.
Right.
So we ordered all the gear the week you still could.
Wow.
Then it was gone. So we were like on it, and I was like, first lesson back, we had our spring break planned the week that everything happened. So we had a week to gather ourselves and come back which worked out well. So first lessons back, I have overhead cameras to the side, all the tech, everything, like, software, like ready to go. Wow. And then when I, well a little bit later, had my first lesson with Roberto, he's sitting there on his phone, nowhere near his piano. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, but just, but you just, he would, in that measure, he would sing everything back, and he'd like, watch this, it's an E natural in that measure, and like, put the pedal in this measure, and like, it's like, man, you don't. And once in a while he'd go over and take his phone, flip it. It's like, maybe try this fingering for that.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, you don't need all this stuff.
Don't need all this fancy
camera. Yeah. And it's been just a wonderful, going on a couple of years of doing it now with Roberto Moore, I guess, again, a weekly occurrence, and it's just fantastic.
Cool.
So he's been my guide through it. He's been my, I bring things to, he's very hands off. He's like, what did you work on this week? And I'm very scattered with, like, I did this week, diving in, getting quite hungry for it.
Where did you start versus where you are now? Like, what were the first pieces that you kind of worked on, or exercises? And then, is it like a progression, or is it just changing the pieces that you're working on different skills? How's that evolve?
It's really just repertoire. I mean, I think the, there were definitely some technical things at the beginning that we had addressed. And now it's more really just kind of purely musical things. Not to say that the technique isn't an issue anymore, but like, we don't really we don't really talk about that. It's more, it's I mean, I've had all these project pieces. So my idea with the pandemic was like, here's all these things that I really wanted to learn, and I've just never done it. I never sat down and dealt with it. So, I mean, the first piece, I think, I went to him with a couple of the etudes, Chopin etudes.
Mhm.
And then those are still a work. I mean, they're always going to be a work in progress, but those are a few of the notoriously difficult ones. I mean, not notoriously difficult. They're freaking difficult.
Mhm.
But I keep coming back to those, and a lot of he's a real expert in Chopin.
That's awesome. I love Chopin.
And so, yeah, a lot of Chopin, some Beethoven sonatas, a lot of Bach. He's a big fan of actually voicing the subjects throughout the fugues, which I still find to be a tremendous challenge of bringing out, just really, doing a nice job of voicing those things. And, he's introduced me to pianists that I haven't heard of, that I, in the classical world, of course you have to know this, and you have to know that recording and all this interesting stuff. And most interestingly, I think, into your field especially, he's a real historian in terms of, just history of music, but he really ties in the evolution of the piano into teaching.
Okay.
And so into how the evolution of the piano and the evolution of notation go hand in hand. And so when you see specific notations, in Chopin, he's like, well, you have to consider on Chopin's piano the kind of resonance that a key would have. So, and also in terms of technique, the type of action that a key would have, that keys had versus have now, and the idea of, a controversial subject of, actually using fingering and, the importance of finger strength. And I mean, not to say that I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the idea that certain things like Hanon are basically totally useless on a modern piano. Where it's there's more arm weight and rotation, and where this is sort of irrelevant. And Chopin, it seems that Chopin had an unfinished treatise on education where he was getting into that sort of stuff. And I don't know, very interesting. Just really every lesson is an interesting thing in terms of what is we see something we think is a crescendo, it's a hairpin, and that meant different things for different composers, and sometimes very vague what it meant. And it really relates a lot to what kind of instrument they're dealing with. The fact that, playing some of the Beethoven sonatas, that Beethoven's piano is smaller. So you need to, so if you're sitting where you would normally sit, it's going to put you in an awkward place because, you want to move 3 or 4 keys to the left. If you're playing them, it's been very valuable to think about that for I have little kids learning Moonlight Sonata, and just to never think about wait a minute, think about his piano. You need to move over there, little things like this that are.
You mean where you sit on the bench, kind of, or where you sit in front of the keyboard?
Where you even place the bench. If
interesting.
this part of the piano, he didn't have it. So his go-to point was not where ours is. And then, even last week we were having a discussion about the different types of pedals that had existed. And you pointed out that there was even a pedal you would use with your knee, like a lever that you would put up to use,
right.
And how those things influence.
The museum of is it the Metropolitan Museum? I think it's the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They have an instrument section, right?
Yes.
Have you been there?
Yeah, I have not.
Yeah, they actually have they have some old pianos and harpsichords and things like that. It's pretty cool. I forget, I went on there. It was a little bit of a private tour, sort of with a curator there. But I still think that the things that we saw were things that you could see if you went through that portion. But yeah, it's very interesting stuff. Okay, well, we should have him on this show. So
you should. He's brilliant. Yeah,
let's do that. Well, that's really cool stuff. A little bit of a tangent right off the front there, but a great one. And maybe we'll come back to it. But I did want to kind of dig back into your past and kind of give people a sense of your foundation. what got you into, music in general and piano? Did you start young with lessons? Is it something you picked up later in life? What's your history there?
I mean, I started, when I was 5 with the lady who played the piano in church around the corner. So, I would like walk up the cul-de-sac and like go to her house and with my little books. And got bit by her dog on like my 3rd lesson, which is like, everyone thought like, no, this is it. He's never going to play again.
That's pretty traumatic for a 5-year-old. Yeah.
This little damn Shih Tzu or whatever. But I don't know. It never was a big deal. It never was an issue. Practicing was never a thing. It didn't matter. I just, I liked to play. And it was almost like as simple as like, oh, I like to push the buttons. I guess it was fairly obvious that I had a good ear. Not a Jacob Collier ear, but like a fine ear. Like, I could figure songs out on my own. I think I got my first keyboard for a Yamaha Clavinova for Christmas, and, open it up and then figured out Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, kind of right away. And so there was, some ability to like hear. So songs, was always, for better or worse, then, it would be very easy to memorize things. The teacher would, show something and then I'm supposed to be reading it, but I would have it memorized and then retain. I guess I had good retention too, which I'm not sure what's happened to that. And so it was never an issue. It was just like, yeah, I had my lesson, cool, practice. I went, play the little songs, that's cool. And that just always that just kept evolving. We moved around a little bit when I was a kid. Ended up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania briefly, and had a wonderful teacher there, a guy named Brent Stater, who was an opera singer, I believe, with the Pittsburgh Opera Company that went defunct or something like that. So, he was teaching piano on the side from the local church on Saturday mornings. And it was like, what do you want to learn? I was like, I want to learn this. Or he'd say, well, you want to do this or you want to do this? He'd play a few things like, I like that one. Let's do that one. And it just kept going. I would bring him songs like, oh, I want to learn how to play this. Or my dad would say like, oh, you should play this. I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun. And then he'd transcribe it and that would be the case. So yeah, practicing was never an issue. Playing was just, it was never something I thought about. It was just always just there. It was like kind of like just breathing and walking. It was just part of every day. Didn't really think about it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. So a little bit different. I just liked playing the piano, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I would have my lessons, and then the teacher would say, here's the things that you need to practice, da, 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 da. And I would play the piano all week, but I would be making these weird compositions and things like this. And then she would sit down and say, so let's play the things you're supposed to practice. And I say, let me play you this song I wrote, and they were always really weird. I remember her being like, oh, that's interesting. Like they always had a lot of dissonance or weirdness in them. And I remember her recommending that I check out 12-tone music.
Oh my gosh.
Like that was like a comment on my, musical taste right there.
That's awesome. Yeah, get some serialism at, an age of 8. It's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Yeah, it was always just fun to play. It was just a nice, like, this is fun. It was cool. It was never it was never a thing. I think I quickly, I had a decent ear and I had some sort of natural facility. So that it made it really easy to miss all the fundamentals and just be playing fun stuff. Like I want to do that. And I could, it wouldn't be an issue playing it, but it was like, I couldn't read it. I didn't know what the heck was going on. Asked me about harmony and chord progressions and scales. And it was kind of like, I don't know anything much about that. I think that the biggest thing that I was always very fortunate to have very inspiring teachers. That was really the important thing was this guy in Pittsburgh was, really inspiring. And I had my fits about like, I don't want to play anymore. And like, he I remember specifically, I was like upset about going to the lesson for whatever reason, because I think it was a Saturday morning and I just wanted to watch cartoons. And he was very calm and sat down and was like, what's the deal? And sort of just like, I was like, oh, no, I guess this is fine. And just put me, you know, and then it was like smooth sailing for the next few years. And you know, I started listening to, through my dad, I started listening to like Dave Brubeck. He had some Oscar Peterson records, and my dad plays a little bit of like blues guitar. So BB King, that stuff was on in the background kind of a lot. And then, and I had an Oscar Peterson Christmas album. And of course, like Vince Guaraldi and Charlie Brown stuff, I kind of got into that. We moved back to Maryland. I was starting to get a little more like teeny, I guess, and a little bit more of a pain in the ass. And I was kind of like, I don't want to play anymore. And they're like, oh, keep it up. Look for a couple teachers. You know, there's like a flyer in the local pharmacy for you know, come to your home music teacher. And this guy shows up who just did not have the vibe. It was like, what is this? And he was just, you know, kind of a, I mean, we spent the first lesson, like, you know, I was like, I want to learn to play this, because that's what my other teacher did. And he couldn't do that. He couldn't do that. He did, you know, he didn't have the capacity to transcribe or this kind of stuff. So I remember we spent the lesson talking about, you know, he telling me what to do if you get attacked by a dog. You know, I was like, what the hell are you? And you know, he's one of these, and he's, you know, he smelled funny, and he, you know, this is just like, this is, and everyone's like, oh Lord, this is not it. And I was quite adamant about like, I don't want to play anymore. I'm done. My friend's like, oh, just, you know, come on, give it a try a little more. And for whatever reason, I was like, okay, I'll do it, but I want to learn jazz. Like I didn't know what jazz, I had no idea. And they, from the local music shop that had just happened to get this jazz piano teacher. And I go in, it was again Saturday morning, and I go in for this lesson. They put me waiting for him in the room. I've never been in a music studio before, like an actual, so it was A crate, like soundproofing, kind of janky, like padded walls.
Right.
And I didn't know it was soundproofing. And like, I was like, is this for if the guy throws me against the wall? Like, this is like, like, what is going on?
That's
here?
amazing.
It's like wild. So I'm like, the whole situation is like scaring me. Like, this is strange. And this dude shows up late to the lesson. It's whatever, 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning on a Saturday. He's in a tuxedo. Like, you know,
nice.
He's all untucked in a tuxedo, reeks of cigarettes.
Whoa.
Comes in, he's like, what do you listen to? I was like, Third Eye Blind. Why? I was like, nice. I don't know. And he's like,
are you going to throw me against the wall?
Yeah, are you going to throw me against the wall? Sure. And he sits down and he plays some boogie woogie stuff. And I was like, whoa. And then he's like, yeah, and he's like, you know, Kenny Kirkland, you know, Kenny, you know, like, and he starts getting into like, I was like, I don't know what the hell this is. And, you know, he's like, okay, you got to bring a tape cassette and you're going to record everything. And I was like, this is wild. Totally 180. That same, actually, my little sister went in I came out of that lesson like, whoa. My parents are like, who is this guy? That like clearly has not gone to bed yet. And it's like, this is DC in the 90s. What has he been doing all night? And my little sister goes into the lesson. She was there trying to get her to play. And like, not but a few minutes after the lesson, door opens. She comes out pouting. And he comes out and says to my mom, he's like, ma'am, I've gotten a lot of dirty looks from women in my life before, but never one as dirty as that little girl is giving me. Forget it. She's not into it. Move on.
Nice. Just
like,
tell it like it is.
Tell it like it is. And I became really, really into it through a series of events, mostly him not showing up on time to lessons. He gets fired from this music store. And my parents decide, well, we'll have him over to the house. And then, you know, it became our Wednesday night thing. I had my lesson at 5. He'd call sometimes at 6:30. I'm on my way. Get there, get there at 7, stay till 10. You know, we'll have stop for dinner in the meantime. And he's, you know, showing me all this like far too hip stuff for me. Like, no, I mean, I don't know what's going on, but he's showing me Oscar Peterson licks, Kenny Kirkland licks, like, you know, I had a school Christmas concert where he arranged, I think it was just Christmas time is here, with like all these substitutions and all this stuff that just like, what's going on? And we developed quite a close bond. And then it would be all right around this time of year, consistently, he would disappear and not show up. Right, we wouldn't hear from him. And you know, my parents had their suspicions about what was going on, and you know, I just like, what's the deal? And then he'd show up, and then we'd reconvene. And then this went on for a few years, and then he just went missing for a while. We didn't see him.
What
and
a
then
character.
He's a character.
What
And
a
then I
character,
get I get a call. It would have been maybe 6 months or so without hearing from him. I get a call from Mike, and he like, you know, gets back to my parents, answer the phone. He's like, I gotta talk to Will. You know, he puts me in, like, and he's like, you know, look, I assume your parents probably have some idea of what's going on, but you need to hear it from me. He's like, I'm addicted to crack. I was like, whoa. And he's like, and I'm up in New York now, and I'm getting clean. This is just like, you know, I didn't know.
How old were you at that time?
At this time, I would have been going into freshman year of high school.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And that's like, yeah, you don't have much context for that.
There's not much context for that. And I mean, it's a tremendous historical context. I mean, this is like the Marion Barry years in DC. Like, this is like, there's a huge DC thing happening here. And then Mike says to me, he's like, you know, if you're serious about, and he, you know, through the years, he'd introduced me to other musicians. He always talked about the cats in town who are like really playing, and this, that, and the other. You know, he very, very, very endearing guy, despite, you know, the issues that were going on of, you know, not showing up, this, that, and the other. But you know, we never felt, my parents trusted him, you know, very deep. Obviously, I hadn't come over to the house, and we're, you know, the two of us just there. We laugh actually because it was always quite a to-do, him arriving for the lesson, because it would frequently be in a new car because he totaled his other car, or, you know, the bus because his license is suspended, or something. It was always like an issue. And so for a while, my mom would drive him back to the metro and have, you know, they'd have these kind of, you know, pleasant talks. I'd be sitting in the back, and, you know, my mom's like, one time, just kind of like, as a mom would ask, you know, it's funny thinking about this, teaching so many kids now. It's like, she said, so how's Will doing? He can't play. She's like, and he goes, yeah, no, he's not gonna be able to play until he's known a woman. It's like,
okay, all right.
All right.
There you go. and this was before you found out.
This is
a drug issue. So you were
grade or something like that.
Right. You're like, what does that mean? I know women. What are you talking about?
What's going on? Yeah, exactly. But so Mike calls from Detox up in New York. And he's like, you know, if you want to get serious about this music, here's the guy that you go see. This is the guy in town. And he pointed out this guy named Calvin Jones, who was the director of the jazz studies program at the University of District of Columbia. Jones was a legend. He's played with with Ray Charles Big Band. He was a trombone player by trade, trombone, then bass, then piano. Just a phenomenal musician. I mean, the epitome of a musician. Just, you know, and Mike had gone to study with him and screwed up, you know, not showing up as, you know, had with his kind of his old habits, that Jones is like, get out of here. And so it was a little like him making the introduction was was a big deal. And it was, kind of this thing of like, here's this kid from the suburbs going down to the University of District of Columbia, who was a student of this guy, Michael, who, is having some issues, going to get with Jones. And, Jones had me audition for him and he agreed to teach me. And then that's where it really started. That's where it was really like, getting serious about the music, really learning about jazz. I mean, from a guy that I wish to God was, still around to, the lessons that I learned then would be so valuable now again, too. He really got to the music. I mean, this is a guy that, for all intents and purposes, couldn't play the piano in terms of, any person who's trying to assess his technique. He played mostly with like two fingers. Then but I mean,
oh wow, oh my gosh.
He used all his finger, whatever, but like
Right.
he played more music than I hear. I mean, everything he played was the right time, the right place, the hippest stuff. Nothing. I mean, he would every now and then you'd get these block chords thing. You'd be like, you listen to Betty Green or Oscar Peterson, but just the most musical guy. It's just like incredible. And we developed a really, really close relationship. And he really introduced me to a lot of people. A lot of musicians came through UDC. And so I would sit in and listen to the big band classes, listen to their ensemble things, and just absorb and meet all these just phenomenal musicians.
And just to be clear, you were a university student at this point, or
no,
you were you were still in high school?
I was a high school kid. Yeah, so I'd take the train. I went to high school in DC, right. Take the subway out, go to my lesson with Jones, then get picked up, and then start hanging out around them more, meeting people then who have become very close friends. Go off to college in Boston, went to Boston College, and then Jones passed away, unfortunately, very, very sad circumstances. And then I was like, I got to get back in touch with Michael. And so I call around to detox places in New York, find Michael, tell him Jones passed away. He's, oh my God. And he was clean. And he's like, it's time for me to go back to DC. And so we reconnected. And have to this. I mean, I was on the phone with him for an hour last night, talking about teaching and talking about tunes, and like he'd be like, yeah, this, yeah, this arrangement, check this out, and showing each other stuff just over the phone. Still to this day, he's clean. He's doing his thing.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. And it's just it's this community that, through all these people that.
Do you ever talk about the story of him being in the front seat, saying that you need to know a woman? Have you talked about that, like a meta conversation?
That and many other moments.
Many other moments.
He's been my go-to guy of like, how should I have reacted to this situation? And he, the way that he comes up with the thing you wish you had, and even if you did, there's no way you ever would have done it. Actually, it's really funny. Years later, I went on tour with this indie rock band, and the tour was not going very well. And so I decided to, when we got to New York, I was like, I'm going to part ways here. And they hadn't paid me anything yet. And they said, we don't have any money. We don't have any cash. I was like, well, that's, not ideal. Their next stop was in DC. And so I was like, they said, yeah, we can get it by DC. I was like, good. I'll have a friend of mine come and pick up the money. And so I call Mike. I'm like, hey man, like this band's going to be at the venue. Like they got a little bit of money for me. Can you go grab it for me? He's like, oh yeah, I'm going to have fun. And he like knew that he knows that, he knows everybody. And he knew the door guy. He's like, yo, what time's the band loading in? He's like, all right, good. And he went and he like out of, they're loading up and he bust open the door. He's like, which one of you had my boy's money?
Nice.
and then of course like they're like freaked out. They give him the money and then they leave best friends. I think they were terrified still. But and he held on to it for months. And, I saw him when I was back in town. It's like, hey man, here you go. Just like, man, what a great guy. I mean, he was a mentor. Yeah. He's still a mentor. Yeah. But
how old is he nowadays?
Oh my gosh, 70.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 70. Still looks about 50. Looks great for his age.
Should we get him on the show? I don't know.
Oh my God, no.
No, yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, you let me know. Like,
I will. It'll be, there might have to be some editing.
we get. We're open to it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe we get both your classical mentor and your jazz, guy on, and we'll have the juxtaposition. Exactly. It sounds like it'll be quite different.
Exactly.
But man, I love it. The quite a story. I want to get, it sounds like we could talk a lot about kind of that evolution as a musician and the kind of the delving into jazz as a concept. I want to cover, one thing I do want to cover, I was going to talk a little bit about your teaching practice, but let's talk about pianos in and of themselves a little bit. We talked about, how you're learning from your classical mentor about kind of the history of the piano. And it is always fascinating to me, right? When you think about, first of all, when I sit down and I try to play classical music at this point, right, I don't have a mentor at all. I just learn the notes and I know it's my interpretation. And I'll improvise. I'll just I know that people would watch me and be like, okay, this is off the rails, please. But even on top of that, what's fascinating about it is even that I'm playing on a piano, right? And it's different than the piano Bach. I mean, Bach, what did he compose it on a harpsichord or something, right? And so it's weird to even consider on top of that there's a wrong or right way to play it on the piano, because the piano is a piano and you're playing on a totally different instrument. But anyways, you have acoustic piano right there behind you, which is awesome, just, for our program. And that's happened several times. We have teachers on and things like that. So have you always insisted on having an acoustic piano? Like, tell me about that particular piano. When did you purchase it? What was that process like?
So this piano,
or inherited or whatever.
This piano is a rental that I've been renting for far too long. I've well overpaid for its value. And the biggest reason being that I am in a 4th floor walk-up with an incredibly narrow staircase. And this is the only piano that will fit up this staircase without taking a wall out and a crane. And
is it what is it, a Yamaha? What kind of piano
B1.
is it?
Yeah, B1.
B1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not my favorite piano at all. It's the second I can get a piano with it. I mean, it works. It does its job. The action is so stiff. The rebound on the keys is so slow that it really is limiting on what can actually be done on it. Some of those etudes really, I mean, they're hard normally, but like the idea, playing La Campanella and it's just, the key doesn't come back up in time to play it again. It's like,
is that something that evolved over time? How long have you had it?
Oh God, for 4 years now. It's always been.
Did it get worse over time, that sort of responsiveness?
It's gotten a bit worse. Yeah, it's gotten, I think, worse over time for sure. Yeah, but it's never been. I mean, I think that's just sort of what it's notorious for. I mean, it
could probably be improved though, for sure.
I think it could. That's what for probably.
Yeah, I'm like offhand. It sounds like maybe the damper. There's something going on with the way that the keys come into contact with the dampers, because the dampers add a little bit of weight to push the key back, and they're probably coming in to the keystroke a little bit late, and that probably got worse over time. There's other things too. You could change the leverage on the action a little bit, probably raise the key height, change the key dip. I bet you could improve it.
I think there's a lot that could be done for probably, I don't know how, considering the rental cost and this, that, and the other. I mean, it would be nice, but yeah, exactly.
And so I like having the piano. So tell me about that moment. You're like, did you go, oh, I'm going to go buy a piano. I'm going to look for a piano. You ended up your piano store. You looked around. You said, oh, well, they said, hey, we have rentals. You said, oh, rentals. Like, is that how that all evolved? Like, how did it get to that point?
I was looking for a rental, just knowing that in New York, I'm so transient in terms of, I've been in this place for a handful of years now. But I know I'm not going to be here for many more years. And so it's just sort of the convenience of they come and pick it up when I'm moving. It's already paid for. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to think about it. And then, when that place, that is the place that I'm going to be in for, when I buy my first place, it's like, or at least have something that isn't a fourth floor walk up, that's when I'll get, something more appropriate for my needs. But it's a necessity. It fits. I don't, I prefer this one to some of the other options. The Yamaha. I mean, Yamahas are consistent, and they, it's hard to beat them.
Did you have a different acoustic piano before you got that one? Did you
I
have a
actually
keyboard?
they did have. Actually, I had another one up here before this one, and I just I can't deal with it. It was so.
So they traded it out for you.
I was like,
or
sorry,
upgraded
guys.
or something.
Yeah. I mean, the
That's nice.
casing was all the casing was all cracked and stuff too. It's like, this is a mess. Like, it's just not. No, it looks bad.
Mhm.
So then I did that, but and I have a Nord. I've got also an 88 key. I travel a lot, so I always bring something with me. So I've got a P120 Yamaha,
Right.
weighted key sort of thing, and then my Nord is semi-weighted. I use it for gigs and this, that, and the other.
Who do you? Who's the rental company? Who are you renting?
Piano.
Piano. Okay.
Yeah.
Familiar with
But I do
that.
I mean, they're great. They're very accommodating. They've been very easy to work with, and they're very good. In terms of I do have I really like the folks at Post Harrison in the city. For that will be where I buy the piano from. They really know their stuff, and they have great pianos, and they're very honest folks. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always interesting to hear people's journeys with pianos, and it's always that. Also sort of, it's always frustrating too when you have somebody who's very talented in piano, such a center of their life, and they're dealing with a piano that is less than perfect. It's like, oh yeah, in fact, Andrew Incuvet, who I mentioned to you, we had on, he's another teacher in the Brooklyn area, and he has got this piano, and it's a similar situation. It's like a walk up. Oh my gosh, you can hardly imagine, bringing something up and down the stairs. And yeah, it's just a struggle that people have to deal with as pianists.
Yeah.
And then you go to, the frustrating part is you go to somebody else's house as a piano tuner, and they've got this amazing piano. They don't even know how to play. It's just kind of sitting there.
Yeah. Horrible shape, out of tune. How many? Yeah, exactly. Beautiful Steinway grands that I get to see that are, haven't been worked on in ever. It's like, oh, guys, come on.
So what makes you want an actual acoustic piano? What made you say I have to have it? Is it just, hey, I'm a professional musician, it doesn't matter, I'm the cost, it's not like a cost is no issue, but it's I'm willing to pay for this rental fee or whatever. I just have to have a piano. Is it because you're a teacher? What makes it a necessity for you to have? That's fascinating, right, to us as piano technicians, because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there's some people out there, I don't even need an acoustic piano. Why do I need that, right? What sells it to you that it's a necessity in your life?
I mean, I approach every type of piano, from electric to acoustic to even different kinds of, every one is a different instrument that you have to approach differently. I have to play my Nord differently than I play this. If I come upon a piano that is easier to play than this, I have to approach it differently. And it's just part of you have to know how to play all of them. That's part of it for me. I got to, and there, of course, there are things on a piano that you just can't do on keyboards. Pedaling things, to name one, that's, and I mean, this pedal is mostly on or off, but, just little subtleties with pedaling and certain techniques. It feels so nice. It does feel, it's a nice feeling thing. And yeah, you have to have one. You just gotta have a piano.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and part of it is that you're a musician, you play keyboard instruments, you're going to have to go out and do a gig on a piano anyways. And so this helps you kind of know what you can do with a piano, right? And practice on a piano and have the piano skills. And that actually reminds me, that's how we met, right? We were at a party of a mutual friend, a Christmas party, which I think Amy moved away. I don't know where she lives now, but great lady, Amy O'Leary, who was working for, I think, the New York Times at the time or something like that. But she would have this annual Christmas party. I was the tuner. I was just her piano tuner. That's,
Yeah.
but we met and we hit it off, and she said, "Hey, come to my Christmas party." And there you were the piano player and I was the piano tuner, and that's where we met. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you know Amy?
It was just totally random. Actually, I think it was
She's just
she
looking for a
posted
piano.
something somewhere looking for a piano player. I was like, yeah, it was kind of early on in New York. I was like, sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
or maybe it was there was some mutual introduction. I think someone that she knew somehow it became but I didn't know her before that.
So I'm realizing there's a lot of stuff, I think I told you up front, it's like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff we could talk about, but we might only talk about a little bit of it.
Right.
So, but I would like to cover, so we covered a little bit about just kind of the experience of having a piano. Maybe have a couple more questions about that, but then I want to talk about your music school, because that's a fascinating aspect of what you do. Just my own personal curiosity, does piano, did they give you like a tuning is that included in the rental? Like how does it work with tuning?
No, that's on your own.
On your own.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about like these kind of, if you wanted to tweak, so it sounds like you're like, you're dealing with an action that's weird or something like that, right? And it's kind of like, it feels to me like your attitude is, I might try to fix it, but number one, this piano is not that, doesn't feel like it has that much potential anyway, and I might get rid of it. So my sense is, number one, you probably wouldn't, you're saying to yourself, you don't want to invest in that because this piano is not worth it. But then also you want to kind of save it for another piano that's like your permanent piano. Is that the case? Like, or have you invested at all in like some extra work to kind of tweak a little bit? Is it just kind of, I just want to pay my tunings and save? Like, how do you treat it?
Yeah, I just don't, it's probably not worth it. I mean, if this were if I knew I was going to be in this place longer and hold on to this thing, and like, if I actually bought this, then I would do some work to it to try to get it better. But like you said, it's like, I mean, it's not, you trying to think of a non-crude expression about polishing it, you can make it better, I think, but like, it's still not going to be, I don't know. I mean, you could tell me better. Is it going to be worth the expense to, how much could it become like something I actually want?
My perspective is there's some small things that you could do, that would make a big difference that you might as well do. It's annoying that you're going to pay for them, and maybe it's not like you're going to get the long-term, value out of it, right? Because it's going to go back to the store at some point. Now you've been improved to their piano, right?
Right.
But I do think there's definitely some small things that you could do, especially when you mentioned like the return on the keys and things like that. I think there's some tweaks that you could make. And then it's just a matter of somebody taking a look at it and presenting you with the budget on different things. Then you just make the decision whether it's worth it. Because at the same time, it's like, it's an investment in your experience of that piano for the coming days that you have it, right? And it might, might make playing more enjoyable and give you better ideas, and just, I don't know, just generally kind of improve the experience. So we can talk about it more, but okay, cool. That was my question on that. Just how the maintenance works. I've had a couple other piano rental people. I think it's more common in New York than other places, although
very common in New York. Yeah.
I think it's becoming more popular. Okay. What about the school? Tell me about that. Like, so you were teaching independently, and clearly maybe it was, you felt like it was working for you, and you have this interesting relationship with your teachers and stuff like that. Briefly tell me about the process of like starting to teach, your experience with it, and then this shift to like, hey, I'm starting a thing where I have other teachers. Like I don't know if it started small or you're like, let's go big, let's have 10 teachers. Like I'm assuming it was a gradual process, but like, how did that progression go from start teaching, get going, and now I'm starting a thing? Yeah. I mean, I started teaching when I was a kid, pretty much, like even back with, teaching neighborhood kids and like, my little brother's friends and this, that, and the other. So, teaching was something that always came very easily to me and very naturally to me. And I knew, like, from my time with Jones back when I was in high school, I was like, this is something I'm very passionate about and something that I really could see myself doing in some capacity. Wasn't sure how. And so, I came to New York. I was teaching
when I was in Boston, I was teaching, working for a company that very much like the one that I had, it's the idea of, they outsource teachers and they send them around to people's homes, like, a bunch of people do. So that gave me an insight into what the whole business is like, and learned a lot of things to take away from it and about what to do and what not to do, how to improve upon it. Got to New York. I was teaching I was an adjunct professor at NYU. So teaching like, non-piano majors.
Got an interesting question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this whole idea of what to do and what not to do, I found interesting in my progress of like doing my own, setting up my own things that I have control over, right? I feel like there's a moment where you're like the employee or the whatever, the contractor, and you're in a system and you go, man, this could totally be better. I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to do it better. And you do XYZ better and you do ABC better. And then you go, oh, I see why this wasn't very good. I don't know whether I can do that better either. Because like, this is like the nature of the system. Do you have any stories like that? Do you feel like you succeeded in improving all the things you wanted to? Did you see any things where you're like, oh, this is just like the nature of, a great example is like, oh, this is too expensive or something, right? Like it shouldn't be this expensive. And they go, oh, you need to charge in order to make
it. Needs to be,
yeah.
Exactly.
So that would be like an example of something where I was like, well, I thought maybe I can improve it by making it less expensive, but that's probably not the answer. Any experiences there in terms of what you felt able to improve and not able to?
Yeah, I mean, well, the one very interesting thing, because I spoke with the director of this former program I worked at, is like, why aren't you other places? And why aren't you in New York? And he's like, it's too difficult to do this in New York. You can't do this in New York. I was like, well, that's challenge accepted, sort of thing. And with so many companies existing like in New York that do this kind of thing, immediately my first thing was, I mean, the inspiration to start this to begin with was just like, I finished grad school. Like, what do we do? How do now what do we do? We have a master's. I have an English degree from undergrad and I have a master's in music. It's like, this is the pre-homeless program. And I'm going around teaching, kids and getting stiffed by parents, chasing around single payments for this, that, and the other, and sharing this experience with peers. We're like, let's get this, let's do this right. Let's get this together. And so that was inspired, like, let's kind of make it official. Let's get payments from people up front for semesters. Let's, safety in numbers. But the biggest thing is like, okay, so everyone does that though. There's nothing novel about that. This is, almost nothing different than what happened with this other company I worked for. I was like, so what do we have to do to be different? We have to do something that's going to just differentiate us. And I was like, well, that should be in our approach of how we teach. And inspired by, my upbringing with all these wonderful teachers, and then my experience of coming to New York.
But you always show up an hour late in a smoky tuxedo.
Always an hour late.
That is your thing.
In a smoky tuxedo, and I talk about how important it is to know someone. Exactly. Perfect. No, I mean, what became very interesting, there's a common theme that had always been in all these lessons, like with Michael through my grad school experience, and that is like the language component of it. And like Michael always talked about bebop language, man, that's language. You hear that line, that's language. And it was like, yeah, kind of, metaphor, okay, great. Everyone talks about that. And Jones always talked about, man, language, you gotta get that language. You come to New York, talk about the language. And when I don't want to say that it got really serious. I mean, I started getting really serious in high school and in college, but then coming to grad school, studied with this guy, Jean-Michel Pilk, who's a freaking genius piano player, just amazing, and self-taught. And I realized from him, like, everything is kind of missing. In a way, music education in general is done kind of backwards. Like, it's sort of, it's upside down in terms of all the things that like he would have us do as very, fairly advanced. I mean, we're grad school musicians, like everyone can play. And he would have these very simple, very musical things. And, he would say so often, he's like, you're a very good pianist, but, you need work. You need to work on your music. He'd say something, he says, yeah, he said, to people, he'd always say, like, I hear a very good piano player. But, so what? And his thing about like, really learning. His thing was like musical fluency, and just the idea of from here, from the ear out, and really developing. We didn't spend a minute talking about how to play the piano in grad school. Not a minute. Not at all. It was all about developing you, in a way that I was like, why doesn't everyone start this way? This is the important stuff. Like, this is the stuff that's going to make you a musician. Like, it's going to give you the connection. This, like, and just the idea of like, why are we teaching kids to read from day one? You don't learn language that way. It just didn't. It started to, like, with this, everything I was learning and like being in New York and being around, really, to be cliche about it, like fluent speakers, especially of jazz, of the language, you just see, you start to speak it yourself, and it becomes more and more natural. But it's like, man, like, why? And there's nothing that was like difficult about what he was showing. It's the simplest stuff that we couldn't do, because we didn't start from that place for so many of us. And I was like, this is what we should be doing with kids. So I was, took all the stuff that I'd learned and sort of put an approach together. And that's how we started. That was our first thing of like, okay, this is what we're going to do that's going to make us different from other people. And with that approach, we've had, I think, pretty good success. We have a very high retention rate, and kids sound great, and kids really love music.
Do you have like founder partners?
No, this is just me.
It's
just me, and I have a core group of teachers. We're kind of small but mighty, and the teachers that I find, as opposed to like going too much into the a training thing, I find it best to, like, there's a lot of musicians in the city who align on this sort of philosophy, and so I find them, and we, it makes it easier. We all kind of agree, yes, this is how it should be done.
Right.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's a little bit similar to my piano tuning business. There's a certain, they actually they find us, and I always feel like maybe it has something to do with like just the ethos on our website or whatever
right.
But it's, you don't have to spend so much time, you're going to do XYZ, read the manual, like,
right.
Oh, no, you get it. This is your attitude. You approach things this way. Great. Let's all just work together.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think, and you learn stuff from each other too. I think that's really nice when you guide people as the founder of the thing, but then, also listening to them to get feedback. And I mean, and the things that I've developed over the years since starting this, I've learned a lot about business from this, and then further endeavors, and like working with people, just managing people, managing musicians, dealing with parents. Sometimes that's been that's a fun one sometimes. And just all that good stuff that has nothing to do with the music, but is necessary.
I know we're going to have to wrap up here in a minute to keep it in an hour, but tell me about the parents. What's an example? Is it that they're demanding they want their kid to be great? Is it that they're like some kind of wealthy and they don't give a crap and you kind of have to deal with that, or is it all of the above? Like where
it's all of the above.
Anybody, but I'm just
exactly, it's all of the above. And there's some absolute, some of the most wonderful people. I've developed really close relationships with so many of these families, and like they've become like family. But I'll tell you one thing that I noticed early on when I first started, like with other teachers going around. Mm-hmm. Something I noticed in New York that I didn't notice in other places so much, and perhaps that was just, I don't know if it's unique to the location or what, but I had a teacher who was teaching a little piano student. Piano student was being a little difficult, and like up on the bunk bed throwing stuff at the teacher. Like, okay, teacher calls me. He's like, hey, how do I, and I'd always been good with kids and good with dealing with that kind of thing. And I'd already had a million tricks of how to like do this, that, and the other. And it's like, okay, try this. Now when you hear the nanny in the background screaming, get down. They get the mom on the phone, like, okay, kid is being difficult. And the mom's response was, tell the teacher to get her under control.
Okay.
And that was shocking because it was like, first of all, that's not how I was raised. No judgment. I mean, a little bit. I'm like, really? Like this, it's that your kids must be like, we're, you know, always the thing of like, you know, we're here to teach music. And that took a little bit of like, that takes a little massaging on people. And it was the realization that like, this is what teachers in New York do have to deal with and everywhere. But this is the thing, being able to manage the children is probably more important than their the information they're getting. That's sad to know, and it's important to know. And so of course I find people, and that's the challenge that can do both. That I know they're learning the, you know, good stuff and they're learning the right stuff, and I trust the teachers with what they're learning. But then also the idea of, you know, I've had over the years, like, you know, calls with teachers who've been like, you know, look, I'm not here to like get a kid off the floor. That's not my job. And I've had to say, like, you're right. Your job is to not let them get on the floor in the first place. Like, if they're on the floor, if you're putting out a fire,
right,
it's too late. Like, you haven't done what, you know, something.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say when you said that it's foundational to the, like, it's not, you're not there to do that. You're there to teach the music, but then it is foundational to the, like, if you can do that, like, if you're good at doing that, if you're good at kind of getting them focused and in the zone,
exactly,
then you can teach them the music.
Yeah. And getting them inspired. And that's what it really, like, and getting them empowered. I think a lot of it comes to, if you can get a kid empowered, a lot of the other stuff isn't as much of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you can tap into them and kind of connect with them in a way that makes sense and makes them feel good and makes it feel easy. I think that's you know, there are challenges, but if they trust you also that you can help them, that you have a solution to all the challenges. That's become something that I've started teaching a lot. It was like, okay, here's the thing, but like, I got a trick for that. I got a trick for that. I got a trick for that. And they're always like, this is the hard part. What's the trick for this? I'm like, I got a trick for that. They feel like, okay, you know, it's not too bad. It's not overwhelming.
Yeah.
No.
They feel supported.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we could talk forever, I've noticed here for today. So there's lots of things that we could have covered. We covered like some basics, and, you know, maybe we'll talk again soon. But we probably should wrap up. Let me make sure, and you know, maybe people want to go find out more about what's going on with you. Tell them where to go, and if any final words of inspiration, feel free to share those before we wrap up the session.
Yeah. Will You Learn, WILLYOULEARN.com. That's the website. We've got a new little endeavor called Stay Sharp that you can find out about on there. It's our sort of an experiment, but a new way of teaching that we're very interested in, and it's getting a little bit of traction. So there's some links on the website. You can go to willyoulearn.com, Stay Sharp. It's all in there. Cool. And a word of inspiration. I'm going to take one out of the book from my good mentor, Calvin Jones from UDC. He would say frequently, don't let anything take the joy out of the music. And that has been my mantra always, to remember it's about the music, and to no matter all the other stuff, to just like remember how much you love music and how much joy it brings, and to like keep that very sacred. Yeah.
Very beautiful. Yeah, you don't know my former co-host David Anderson, but I think I might have mentioned him to you. Mm-hmm. Kind of like at the point when he was with us, a kind of wise old spirit. And we just did a review of some of his lectures as well, and it's that's what he's all about. Just appreciating the moment of what you're doing. You know, is it piano playing? Is it tuning a piano or whatever? Enjoy it, right? Enjoy it. Don't get rid of all those voices in your head saying this is dumb or stupid or whatever. Just make it about enjoyment and appreciation. That's great.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we've reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to Will Armstrong for joining us today, and everybody for attending. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today, signing up for this session individually.
Well,
As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today signing up for this session individually, you can make your life more convenient. You can subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's just $16 a month. You'll get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You can sign up at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com/PTRH-direct access, and we'll put that link in the chat so you don't have to write it down or remember it. And yeah, thanks again, Will, for joining us today.
Thank you. It's fun.
Appreciate it.